What up? Back at it again with another video. Before I get into the video, make sure you go ahead and smash that thumbs up button and leave a comment if any part of this speaks to you. For today's video, I'll be doing a response to Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings. And I just want to make you aware that I do have timestamps, so if you want to skip ahead to certain parts, or if you want to rewind to certain parts, then you can do so. Just go to the description box below and do your business. As I said in a recent video, I'm pivoting my channel and this will be my first ever fully scripted video, so wish me luck. Reading the establishment's 2015 post titled "Yes, Your Dating Preferences Are Probably Racist" was not the first time I'd recognized the media's white supremacy model, or that the word preference is often misused, but this definitely put a bug in my ear to continuously examine and aim to unpack my own preferences, examine who I desire, how that has changed throughout my life, and why. Black feminists I follow online, such as Maziele Weti, Mbewe, and Ya Asante Waba, have tirelessly discussed colorism, featureism, texturism, beauty pageants, etc. Gay, bi, and pan men I follow online have talked about femphobia and same-gender dating, and Janet Mock's 2017 Allure essay titled "Being Pretty is a Privilege, but We Refuse to Acknowledge It" helped further unpack and give context. When pointed out and discussed with the depth they deserve, I could clearly see how the aforementioned were products of white supremacy. When it came to weight and health, it was not as easy for me to see, though I believe that fat phobia is wrong politically, medical bias-wise, and socially, and have challenged many thin and muscular people about it online and in real life. What I'd been taught about nutrition, metabolism, and desirability was at odds with this. A huge impetus for leaving Christianity, investing in personal growth, mental wellness, learning about race, sexuality, and gender beginning in 2012 centered my optimal health. Health in every area of my life has been central to my identity since. Something I naively thought was a neutral and untouched by white supremacy sect of what it meant to be human. And it has only been over the last few years that I've come to deeply understand that the foundation of Western psychology, both study and in practice, see the medical industrial complex graphic, is ableism, and the foundation of physical health is fat phobia and the ascetic aesthetic, as Sabrina Strings mentions in this book, which are both inherently anti-black. That was the intro. How am I doing? Now onto the synopsis of Fearing the Black Body. If I had to summarize this book in one sentence, I'd say this book traces the origins of fat phobia and its inextricable link to anti-blackness throughout the centuries to present day, specifically how black women's bodies have been racialized in Western society for hundreds of years. Here's the synopsis straight from Sabrina Strings' website. There is an obesity epidemic in this country, and poor black women are particularly stigmatized as diseased and a burden on the public health care system. This is only the most recent incarnation of the fear of fat black women, which Sabrina Strings shows took root more than 200 years ago. Strings weaves together an eye-opening historical narrative ranging from the Renaissance to the current moment, analyzing important works of art, newspaper and magazine articles, and scientific literature and medical journals, where fat bodies were once praised, showing that fat phobia as it relates to black women did not originate with medical findings, but with the Enlightenment era, belief that fatness was evidence of savagery and racial inferiority. The author argues that the contemporary idea of slenderness is, at its very core, racialized and racist. Indeed, it was not until the early 20th century, when racialized attitudes against fatness were already entrenched in the culture, that the medical establishment began its crusade against obesity. An important and original work, Fearing the Black Body, argues convincingly that fat phobia isn't about health at all, but rather a means of using the body to validate race, class, and gender prejudice. Now, onto the elements that stuck out to me. The first was white men making a career out of waxing poetic about white women's appearance, which reminds me of the way men of all sexualities today celebrate or berate women based on their looks as though they're inanimate objects. This seems to be central to manhood, which many argue is inseparable from whiteness. Men as self-appointed appraisers of the looks, intelligence, and value of women. The next thing that stuck out to me was that so many well-off English men and women flocked to extreme versions of vegetarianism as a way of remaining remaining thin. This was a challenge in the 17th century as the English saw an influx of sugar in their diet because of it being imported in mass by way of the stolen labor via the transatlantic slave trade. Physicians hadn't made the link between sugar consumption and weight gain, or its link to gout, listlessness, and frayed nerves, though weight gain was deemed uncultivated and would situate someone as a racial and national other. To be pious, refined, beautiful, superior was to restrict oneself of food, and the appearance of thinness was evidence of one's own devotion and refusal to indulge in worldly pleasures. White women's beauty, and thinness in particular, was evidence of the race's superiority. Gluttony and being fat was posed as barbaric, less evolved, black. Corpulence was avoided as a tell of white Christian morality, and is a surviving principle amongst present-day Seventh-day Adventists. The next thing that stuck out to me was that Europeans who were considered at the bottom of whiteness, like the Celtic Irish and Italians who were thought inferior to Anglo-Saxons, described as hybrids, part African, part Asiatic, anti-blackness was required to apply a low status to them, and yet their whiteness is what protected them from being enslaved. Something else that stuck out was how disordered eating was and still is encouraged for the desired aesthetic. Ways we gauge health like BMI, daily calorie intake, and food charts have been built on fat phobia and anti-black racism, and the ableism at the core of the medical industrial complex. Lastly, this book made it clear that women like Lizzo are being met with vitriol curated over centuries, and is in part why Chloe of Chloe and Halle is interpreted the way she is. Round, plump, pink lips are read as inherently sexual or sexy. Curvy bodies are positioned as inherently sexual, sassy, black. Being refined, civilized, and moral are integral aspirations of whiteness without recompense. It reminds me of how the driving force for many white abolitionists was that slavery was too barbaric a thing to participate in, a thing that stained the purity of the white race. It has me thinking about my own motivations behind unlearning fat phobia, and whether this is about equity and anti-black racism, or if it's about me being hell-bent on preserving the sense I have of myself as moral and good. My unadulterated thoughts on the book are that it's an incredible look at history and how it informs how we as a culture process attraction, anti-blackness, whiteness, and pathologize and medicalize being fat. Thinking about all of this has me feeling like the small blip in time that I am. Studying history makes me feel incredibly insignificant and like such a product of my time, down to who and what I find attractive. Without centering myself too much, that has been a very hard feeling to come up against and to think about. I think that's a hard pill for anybody to swallow, to be made aware that your attractions aren't 100% unique to you and your personality and your particular tastes, but instead that they've been influenced and curated by external factors and people in very deliberate ways who died long before you were thought of. While reading this book, I noticed I became very critical of my attractions, and in a way I felt criticized. In some ways, that was the point of me reading the book. The intended purpose was for me to learn and grow. I knew there would be uncomfortable parts of this growth, and this was definitely one of them. It is hard to feel like my attractions are not organic or natural. They've been curated over centuries, and that is really scary. Learning this context was really hard, and I really appreciate it in a lot of ways. It makes me more interested in history, but at the same time, studying history can be so trippy, becoming acutely aware that we don't exist in a vacuum. I knew that conceptually, but it was hard to receive in a very practical way, like body type preference, when I wasn't aware. It's disorienting and disconcerting and overwhelming. I'm only here for a little bit of time, and there are all of these forces that have existed since before I was born that literally impact not only my quality of life, but also my perception of others. That is trippy as hell. It's laying out the timeline of humanity, prior, present, and future. It points out that I exist inside of a container, the universe and time, that's ever expanding. It's a lot to process. It makes me wonder about the preoccupation with beauty in the first place. One could argue this is simply natural, that we are all drawn to what we find beautiful, which will be different from person to person. But what I mean is the insistence on debating it, the praising, then rewarding, the scoffing at, then punishing, and moralizing attractiveness. This seems to be an extension of white supremacist notions and a vector for gender discrimination. Aesthetics as a determinant for value is a priority of eugenics, is a priority of white supremacy. I think about Stephen Underwood's essay, Black Boys and Bird Chest, or the racialized legacy of body dysmorphia in African American men. In it, he talks about the disappointment, the abuse, and criticism his frail black pubescent body was met with. His experience with body dysmorphia as a black man, the world's obsession with the black male physique, masculinity, authority and conditional power. I think about Kimberly Foster of For Harriet and her video titled WAP and the Spectacle of Sexual Liberation, where she aptly critiques Black women being coerced into displaying a very particular kind of sexual expression in order to be marketable as musicians and on social media, and how it is mislabeled as sexual liberation far too often. Big Black men are celebrated for their accomplishments in sports while constantly being taken advantage of, seen as property in the case of J.R. Smith and his supreme tattoo, and being commanded to leave politics out of sports. Black women are coerced to perform a sexuality that appeals to the male gaze in music and entertainment in order to be successful, while marred by the very same thing. I think about how these sanctions of white supremacy are used to make a case for Black people as more primal, animalistic, less evolved. I think about fat Black women's bodies and their minds and their spirits and their will and their liberation and their joy. Okay, that was quite a lot. If you made it this far in the video, please leave me some hearts in the comment section below, and please let me know what you think about this scripted content. I am going to try to get better at this. This is new for me, so please be gentle. Yeah, I'm gonna think about like teleprompting and like, I don't know, like how to like situate it better so that it's more like in eyesight, so it's not as distracting, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't distracting. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section. As you can tell, I'm kind of like, I don't know, did I do good? Did I not do good? You know? Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Peace.